Welcome to the Feria TechCast, where we'll bring you all things science, engineering, technology, and innovation. Today we are joined by Angelo Zanetti, the co-founder and co-CEO of Elemental, a web and software development company based in South Africa, which was founded in 2005. So, Angelo, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ezekiel. Thanks and hello to the viewers. Yeah, I'm really ecstatic to be on the show, so appreciate the invite.
Yeah, I am equally excited to have you here. So, let's dive in, Angelo. You've been building digital products for over 20 years. So, what first drew you into the world of software development and founding an agency?
Okay. So what first drew me to software development was actually in school. A friend of mine's brother, he actually was doing programming at school, computer science, and then he would come home after school and he'd be coding stuff. He was actually writing stuff in Turbo Pascal, which not many of you probably know that language. It's quite an old language. But he'd write some code and then he'd show me something on the screen and then he'd change some code and then something else changed on the screen. And I was like, wow, that's really fascinating. And when I finished school, I actually went and studied programming. So that's kind of how I got into it. Being able to manipulate the code and then, influence the output. Then, fast forward a few years, what led to our agency being formed, there was actually sort of a lack of options when we started our company. So when I finished studying, there was this thing called the dot-com bubble, which was quite a long time ago. And maybe some of your older viewers might be familiar with it. But essentially, the tech stock markets crashed and many IT professionals lost their jobs. You know, any graduate like myself having limited experience, there was no real chance of getting hired, when people are getting let off left, right, and center. So we thought, well, what option is there but to start our own company? So, we figured like, let's start this company, see where it goes. And so it was more by circumstance and less by choice that we started our agency.
Interesting. That's a really, fascinating journey. So take us back to 2005. So what was the vision when you started Elemental, and how has the company's mission evolved over the past 2 decades?
Yeah. So back when we started the company, my partner Jerry and I, picture it, we were two young developers. We were only skilled and we were only educated in writing code. We never knew what it was like to run a business, to do sales, to do marketing, to manage clients, to write the code. So we didn't really have much of a vision, to be honest, and a mission. We kind of took every day, day by day. And as our company evolved, as we matured more as, I suppose, business owners, as our team grew, our vision has become much more clearer, and so has our positioning. And yeah, I think our team, they obviously contribute a lot to how we work and how they make Elemental better. And basically, we've really found what we're good at and what stimulates us. And we've also learned that, some things we aren't very good at or we don't like doing. And, that also shapes our mission and our vision and what we sort of want to do. So that's how we came about our mission and vision.
Wonderful. So the name Elemental, what does it represent to you, and the philosophy behind your work? I'd like to know how it all, got joined together to become your company's name.
Yeah, our name doesn't really mean, well, there's not real meaning behind it, but I think if there's a significance, I think the significance is for us to do things properly and to do things the best of your ability. So what we mean by that is we aim to be really, really meticulous or really, really thorough in everything we do in our business. So, the first time a client calls us, we want to be thorough. We want to be asking the right questions. We want to communicate quickly. So from that initial engagement with the client to when we're finishing a big project, we're delivering, getting things over the line, we want to be extremely thorough. So every single touch point, every communication, every piece of work that we work on, we aim to do as thoroughly and meticulously as possible.
Great. So, Angelo, you often say that strategy is just as important as code itself. So, what does that mean in practice for a founder building a new product?
Sure. Okay. So that's a good question. So what I'd say is that there are many aspects to building tech products than just building the technology itself. Uh, so strategy entails, more than code. It entails understanding who are your users. What are the problems or pain points of your users, and how is your product going to solve these issues? So besides knowing that and coming up with a solution as a tech product, you also need to think about and strategize how you're going to build a product. What features are you going to include in the launch of the product? What features are you going to sort of park for later release? That's also part of strategizing. And then another part of strategizing is also thinking about how are you going to market your product, or how are you going to get users to come and use your product? How are you going to get engagement? Which is really important, because a lot of founders, they think that if I build this tech product, this web app, this mobile app, if I build it, they will come, which actually is not really the case. Building it's half the journey, marketing it is another half of the journey. So I think strategy touches on many aspects, when it comes to building tech products.
Okay, that's pretty insightful. So let's talk about the art of saying no. Can you share a story where strategically killing a feature ultimately save a product?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We've actually got a client that we're working with now, and when we engaged with them initially, we spoke to them, and they always wanted a mobile excuse me, and they kept on saying, we want a mobile app," and we were like, "Well, why do you want an app? Like, well, for what reasons?" So what we did is we actually we provided them with a comparison of like a web-based version versus a mobile-based version of their application, and they could sort of compare and understand, and what are the different implications, cost wise, time wise, complication wise. There's also the things like the app stores that take a percentage of revenue of in-app purchases. So by providing our client, this comparison, and by sort of saying no to them, that we're not just going to build a mobile app, we just want to sort of understand why. I think it's really kind of, they shifted their thinking, and they actually agreed with us, and we actually busy building a quite a nice web app for them. And we can always do a mobile app in the future, but I think if we just didn't say no and we just went with what they said, I think it would be the wrong choice for their product, to be honest, and it will cost them a lot more, and there will be a lot more complications down the line.
Hmm. Okay. So for our audience of engineers, so tell us, how do you define scalable and high performance for a web application in today's landscape?
Okay. All right. So the first is in a sense of the technology or the framework you're building the product in. Uh, is the code or the framework that you're building in able to handle, future expansion? So are you able to add more features in future? Are you able to add more functionality? So, for example, your web app might start off quite simple, but think about 3 to 5 years down the line. What's it really going to look like then? How many more features is it going to have? Will it have, multiple languages? Will it have different payment options? Will it be integrating into like ERPs or CRMs in real time? So I think in terms of scalability, make sure that the tech stack you're building on, or the framework, or even the way you kind of design the application from a database and a code point of view, make sure that you're thinking longer term from a scalability point of view and expansion of features. And then the second item when it comes to scaling is related to more of the usage, right? So again, when you start your application and you launch it, you might have tens of users, hundreds of users, thousands of users. But think about a few years down the line, 3 to 5 years down the line, when you've got hundreds of thousands of users or millions of users and multi-millions of records and data points. How's your app going to handle that large volume of data? How's your app going to handle, such big traffic volumes? And what needs to sort of change between now and then so that you don't really have to re-engineer big parts of the application? Think of the scale and the growth that your and the traffic that your application can experience, and then make provision for that from the start. Yeah, so I think those are the sort of two biggest things when it comes to sort of scalability and high performance.
Okay, so Angelo, let's talk about the evolution in the software development space in the past 2 decades. So you've seen massive shifts in tech since 2005. What has been the single most significant change in how software is built since then?
Okay. Yeah, we've seen a lot. So I'll answer this in a slightly different way. So when we started, using computers and programming, many of the applications that we used were installed on your computer. We did have web browsers back then. So there was obviously Internet Explorer, which is part of Microsoft, and there were different versions of Internet Explorer. And for those of your viewers who know and go back to those times, you had like Internet Explorer 6 and 7, and they all worked really, really differently. Like 6 was very different to 7, and some people had 6 on their computers and some had 7. So you had to write different versions of your sort of web application or your website and different style sheets just to sort of handle those different browsers. But
Wow.
I think, uh, yeah, it's quite crazy. And then obviously, some of the older browsers died. There was a lot of newer browsers that came. So for example, Firefox came about, Google Chrome came about. But they still had sort of limited capabilities and limited functionality. But it's obviously evolved to a point now where you know, companies or platforms are completely web based. If you think of Google Docs, it's got Sheets, it's got Docs, it's got Calendar, it's got
Yeah.
Mail. So everything that you used to run and install on your computer basically is running in a web browser. That means you can build such powerful applications to run in a web browser. We also need to think about mobile, because back in the day, we didn't even have smartphones. We had feature phones, and then there was sort of like these web-based mobile sites called websites, and you could write sort of web pages in sort of WAP, and then yeah, but it was quite limited and it was very sort of basic. And compare that to like what you can do now on your web browser. I mean, you can run fully fledged apps. So it's kind of evolved very quickly over a sort of a shortish period of time. But it's been really great to see the evolution of browsers, I would say, and mobile devices.
Wow, that's very insightful. So, despite all the new tools and languages, Angelo, what's one fundamental principle of building good software that has never changed since the past 2 decades?
Yeah, good question. So I would say that most web applications and software and mobile apps, they're always running on top of databases, right? So I think the key is to design, well architected databases, really well structured databases, because all the data in your app is sort of stored in that, and how all the data points are interrelated, um, is in your database. And database design and architecture is also key to your speed of your application and scalability, which obviously I touched on earlier. So I think that's still something that's very powerful, but maybe overlooked, nowadays.
Okay, so what's one piece of old school tech wisdom that you feel new developers are often missing today?
Yeah, I think that planning is something that's often neglected or it isn't given enough priority. So what I mean by that is, in order for your project to be successful or your product to be successful, you need to really plan it. So many developers, they just want to run and jump into the code and start coding and creating all these different modules and functionality, sort of skipping the planning phase, which is not good. We're always of the opinion that you need to kind of take a step back, plan out the project, scope it out, think about the exceptions. How do you cater for future features, which I spoke about earlier on in terms of scalability? And how do you plan for functionality that your app can work now, but also doesn't need to be re-engineered in the future? Yeah, so planning is really, really important, and it's not always fun. So developers, they want to write code, they want to see instant results, but I think it's a very, very good practice to adhere to, and it'll make your product a lot better. It will actually make your development a lot clearer, and it'll simplify things, and make provision for different items in your applications.
Okay, let's talk about the entrepreneurship side of things a bit. I'd like to dwell on this for a while. So, from your experience, what are the top three mistakes non-technical founders make when they first approach a development agency?
Okay, all right. The first thing I would say is that many tech founders, they've they've obviously seen a problem in most likely their industry. They've come up with a nice solution, but they want to have an MVP or a product that they launch with that's got a lot of features. And I think a lot of MVPs have non-core features or nice to have features, which I feel shouldn't, or not shouldn't, but more often than not, shouldn't be included in the MVP. Then the second thing is that a lot of founders are, building proof of concepts and MVPs and products on these AI tools like Lovable. And we've seen it firsthand where they've come to us and they've built what looks like a sort of decent product, um, but it doesn't really work, and they're kind of stuck. And then they essentially go, "Well, please, I need you to help us finish this product." So there's a lot of different screens. There's some user flows. There's some journeys, but the functionality is not there. And when we look at the code or we look under the hood, it's really like something that we can't even work with and we can't even finish it. So we kind of have to scrap it and we have to break the bad news to them that they need to kind of rebuild this properly from scratch. So that's a sort of second problem that I think a lot of non-technical founders are making. Um, and then lastly, I think, and I did touch on this earlier, but I think this is not a tech item, but it's actually more related to marketing, where a lot of companies, they will build a product, but they don't think of marketing at all. They haven't set aside a marketing budget, or they haven't thought of how they're going to attract users or gain users. And sometimes these are really great products and they fail because there's been no thought of marketing or how can they gain traction. And I think that's a big mistake that we've seen here and there, not all the time, but it has happened from time to time, which is kind of sad, right?
Okay, so once a project is underway, what is the most common way teams waste time and budget, and how can they avoid it?
Right. So I would say that one of the most common ways of wasting time or and budget is chopping and changing, features. So, you maybe worked out what's going to be in the MVP, you've scoped it out, you've started design, you've done some development, and then things, the founder changes their mind, and then they want to bring in other features that aren't essential, or they want to remove things that are already built. Part of the application needs to be redeveloped and replanned, and this definitely wastes a lot of time and money, and actually also delays the going to market, which is quite important as well. If you're trying to have not a first mover advantage, but you're trying to get to market quickly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does actually. So, how can a founder effectively bridge the communication gap between their vision and the development team's execution?
Yeah, so they've got an idea of a product that they want to build. So I would say they would need to be as prepared as possible to create as many documents, write down as much information, create some diagrams, as much as possible, when trying to explain their vision and how their concept is going to work. But I also think it's a duty of the development agency to sort of take their vision and then to sort of scope it out properly, um, and to advise the fund on what they should be doing and what they should be including in the MVP and what they need to park for future development. Um, and I think it's also the duty of the development agency to educate the client on certain considerations and decisions, and and this actually helps founders make much more educated decisions. So if you think about building a house, right, you don't just want to start putting down a foundation and putting the bricks down and building walls. You actually want to go to an architect who designs the house, who creates the blueprint, who kind of works with the client, extrapolates everything from the client's mind, documents it, scopes it out, and then only once that's done, signed off, then does the building happen. And that's the same in development. You need to really scope out the work properly, think of what you're going to include in the MVP, what you're going to park for later, how you're going to handle certain situations, what happens when certain exceptions happen. Document all those things and then make provision for them. And then when you develop, you've got a clear sort of plan from which to develop from.
Okay, so uh, you know, I like also discuss on a case study of how a project moved from MVP to market. So, walk us through a project story you are proud of. What was the initial problem? What were the key strategic decisions you made together, and what was the outcome?
Sure. Okay. So we've done lots of projects, but one that comes to mind is a client of ours or platform called Change Cars. And essentially what Change Cars is, it's a website where you can search for cars and, inquire, and there's a whole lot of features, but essentially this client wanted to rival some of the biggest players in South Africa. So there's two big websites. There's actually quite a few, but the two biggest websites are a website called Auto Trader, which is also based in the UK, and then there's a site called cars.co.za. So what we had to do is we had to start quite small. We had to really build the sort of leanest version of the MVP, and we felt that the strongest part of the site would be the search, and how to make that as powerful as possible, but how to make it as easy to use as possible. And that's one of the sort of core features that I keep speaking about, when you're putting into, when you want to launch an MVP, what are the real core features? And these were definitely core features. So the goal was to get traction, and basically how the website works is you need dealers on the site who give us their stock, all their vehicles. But at the same time, we needed a lot of stock on the site to show the public that they could go and search and browse and find vehicles and inquire about them. So it was quite a tricky balancing act. But as we got traction and as we got more dealers on and as more people started to use the platform, we then identified the sort of next set of features to be developed. And we always joke that, okay, well, we just need this certain feature, and then we kind of done with development. And that was sort of 3-4 years ago. And, we're still building new features. So what started as an MVP, very simple, has, it did get traction, and now it's like a fully fledged web app that's, really, really generating lots of leads, lots of traffic, and there's a bunch of functionality that we built for over 4 years on that platform. So that's a really nice example that comes to my mind.
Okay, so looking at the future landscape, Angelo, what are you most excited about in the next chapter of software development?
Um, so I'm excited about how software development is, software development and tech is allowing a collaboration between business and technology. And what I mean by that is that, excuse me, is that there are many companies and many industries that are not, they were not very tech savvy, and they were not really adopting technology, but they're actually, I mean, technology is touching every industry now. So many companies and many industries are using tech, to basically become more efficient, to solve real problems in their business, to make them more profitable, to drive growth, and to really make a difference in their business. So that's quite interesting from a the next chapter of software development. The adoption of technology. I suppose you could call it digital transformation. But the other thing is how AI is giving people the power to create proof of concepts and sort of take an idea, flesh it out, maybe create some sort of prototype, which kind of can be used as a base before a full product is developed. So I think that's also quite exciting from a software development perspective.
All right, so what's one piece of advice, or essential advice for a new engineer or founder who wants to build something that lasts today?
Yeah, I would say that you really need to build something that solves a real world problem. Many tech startups build products for problems that don't really exist. Um, and I think that's why a lot of startups fail, is that there's sort of no product market fit. And so if you're not solving a proper problem that people are willing to pay for, then you're not going to get traction. Your product's going to fail. And I just would also like to touch on what I said earlier about spend a lot of time upfront planning, strategizing, thinking about all the different scenarios, the user journeys within your product, and scope it out, plan it properly, detail it, document it, and essentially do that before you write any code, before you design your database. And I think your product will be a lot stronger. And I think it's really good practice to adhere to when you're doing software development projects.
Wonderful. So, Angelo, part of the theme of this podcast is centered around innovation. So, for that reason, there's kind of like a common question that I like to ask every guest that I interview on the show. So, tell us, for you, what does innovation mean in the context of software development and entrepreneurship?
For me, the innovation means to use technology and software development to build really, really clever solutions that solve proper problems, and then ultimately add value to the users who use the tech, right? I touched on it before that many companies are really looking at tech to use tech to give them a hand up, right? To make them quicker, to make them more efficient, to give them better access to data, to reduce their costs, to grow their market, to acquire more users. So, really using technology to innovate, I think that for me is what I see as sort of how software development and entrepreneurship come together.
Okay, that's interesting. So finally, where can our listeners go to learn more about Elemental, or perhaps, get some consultations from you?
Yeah, so you can get us at our website. So that's www.elemental.agency. So that's elemental.agency. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Angelo Zanetti from Elemental. Hit me up, send me a message. Yeah, always keen to chat about tech and products and yeah, how and software development. So that's where you can find me.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So, Angelo, it's been a conversation filled with so much insights and value, and I'm excited to have you on the show today.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And yeah, I really enjoyed today's discussion. And yeah, thanks for having me.